Hello and welcome to CRM Stage. Today's session, getting started building Slack apps in JavaScript. My name is Jonathan Fox and I'm going to be your host for today's session. A little introduction. I'm a 22 times certified Salesforce system and application architect. I'm a technical architect for a Salesforce.org partner called Sirico. I am a Golden Hoodie recipient, very proud Golden Hoodie recipient, and a Salesforce military trailblazer, as I used to be in the British Army. I embarked on my Salesforce journey not too long ago in 2018, and I dived headfirst into the world of Salesforce and recently immersed myself into the world of Slack because Slack is so powerful. Hence today's session, building a Slack app. Now, we can build Slack apps in a number of languages. Today we're going to be using JavaScript, and I wanted to explore really high level, touching the basics of getting started with Slack app development because it is so powerful what we can do with a Slack app. Now, why do you want to build a Slack app? I guess is the first question. We're in our digital HQ. Everything about Slack is how we can utilize our HQ and not have to swivel the chair into different systems, apps, and pieces of software and do everything from our Slack workspace. And the way we can do that is one of the ways we can do that is through our apps. And we can custom build our Slack apps, and we can download and install Slack apps from the app directory. Google apps, for example, Jira, or other Atlassian apps. A whole host of apps, Salesforce apps, but perhaps they are too standalone and they only do each other's, their own independent functionality. Perhaps we want to build some custom functionality. We want to interact with a software vendor that doesn't exist on the app directory at the moment, or we have an on-premise server with our homegrown applications that we need to interact with. Well, Slack apps is where we can get involved and really help utilize the power of Slack for our employees and not have to force them to leave Slack to carry out these functions and features. Allow them to carry on business as usual and do everything within the workspace. So without further ado, let's head over to Slack's api.slack.com and start building our first Slack app. So let's have a look. What we need to do is head over to api.slack.com, and what we want to do is create a new app. From here we get two options: create from scratch or from a app manifest. Now, app manifest is in beta, and it's got some different features and functionalities. We're only scratching the surface, hence from scratch. We need to give our app a name. You can give it whatever you want to call it. Ideally, you're going to give it a name that provides it with a bit of a hint of what it does, so that when your users in the workspace are searching for it in the app directory, they can see from a glance which app they want to use. I'm just going to call it Slack app getting started for now, because that's what we're doing. We're getting started with Slack app development. Now, you can pick a workspace for your Slack app to be installed in for the development and testing purposes. I would suggest best practice is to spin up a fresh workspace for you to develop and test your heart's content. What you don't want to be doing, if you even have the permissions to do so, is building it and testing it and developing it within your enterprise workspace, because this app can potentially react, read, listen to events and messages that go on within your workspace. And until it's fully tested, you don't want it to interact with business as usual activities and disrupt your corporate users. So spin up a workspace isolated away from everyone so that you can test it and develop it first. What you need to do, go ahead and do, is click Create App. Once you've clicked Create App, this now is the area where you can configure your app. You can configure how it looks and feels. You can configure how it has permissions to do certain things, such as write messages or join channels. You can also configure your app to be interactive or even listen to events that happen within your workspace. And we're going to actually explore some of that today. First of all, what you want to do is scroll down, all the way down, to display information. Your app is only as useful as the use it gets. If it doesn't get used, then it's not useful. In order for people to find it and use it, you need to give it some information. So a short description, when they're searching for the app, they get to see the short description about what it does. And that's where you can enter some quick snippet of information about what your app actually does. You want to give it an icon, so something that people are likely to see and know what it does. Maybe it's your corporate logo, or maybe it's the logo of the homegrown system that you've built, something that people are familiar with. And then you want to give it a nice matching color so people know, it catches their eyes, the people can see it straight away. Let's go with a nice darker color. And then give it a long description. So when people click on the app, they will see the long description. And you want to give it a description that people can then understand what the app actually does, so they know they want to use it. When you've configured that and you're happy with how your app looks, the icon, the descriptions, and even the name if you really want to change the name, what you now can do is scroll further up to the app credentials part. The app credentials are what we are going to use throughout the session of building the app, and it what allows us to connect our workspace to the app hosted on a server somewhere. We're going to use the sign-in secret primarily as one of the keys or tokens, secrets in this case, that we're going to need. So what I want you to do first and foremost is copy that and save it somewhere safe. You don't want people to get hold of it who are not authorized to use it, but you do need to use it within our development for today. Next, what we want to do, we've got our sign-in secret. That signs our interaction between the app running on our server and our workspace to know that it's a secure and it's the trusted, it's a message from a trusted service. We want to head over to OAuth and permissions. Did we save that? Yes, I think we did. If we didn't, it's okay. We want to head over to OAuth and permissions. In OAuth and permissions, this is where we give our app the permission to do certain actions within our workspace. In order to install it into our workspace, we need to give it some scopes. To do that, we need to head down to scopes and add an OAuth scope. Our app today that we're going to build, when the app is opened, we are going to send the user a message, and we may even display a view to the user. So in order to do that, we need to, what we're also going to do is send a message to the user as well when the app home is opened. In order to do that, we need to give the app permission to chat :write. Now that scope allows the app to write a message to a user or a channel. The basic functionality of this app is going to be to write a message, be that in a view, in a message, in a channel as a message. It needs to be able to send information, and we're going to do that through the chat write scope. Now that we've given it some sort of permission and something to do, we can now install it into our workspace, and that's exactly what we're going to do. This triggers the standard OAuth flow that you may have seen before when installing apps or connecting services to other platform vendors. And you can see that the scope that we're given is to be able to send a message. So we're going to go ahead and click allow. And once we've clicked allow, that has given our app permission to be within our workspace and write messages. And for now, that is everything we're going to configure. The last thing we need to do whilst we're here is copy this bot user OAuth token. And again, save that somewhere safe because we're going to use it for our development of our app. Now, we're going to navigate away from api.slack.com and we're actually going to head over to VS Code. VS Code is my chosen IDE. You can use any that you want to use, but I am going to use this for today's session. What you need to do to start with is install a couple of different packages to be able to make our app useful. First of all, I'm going to do npm init. This is going to initiate the creation of my JavaScript package. If you want to publish this and ship it to different people, or even publish it online for other people to use this app and build it themselves, then you can give your package name, description, version numbers, etc. I'm going to leave it all as default because for today's session, I don't need to do that. But now my package.json is being created. There are a couple of things now that I'm going to install. I'm going to install, let's just make that a little bit easier to see. I'm going to install npm I nodemon. Now, I'm installing nodemon because when I start my app, it means that if I make any changes to my JavaScript file and save them, the app automatically restarts. So it's just a really nice, useful tool to be able to develop and debug on the fly. Next, what I'm going to install is @slack/bolt. Now we're using the Slack Bolt framework because it handles a lot of the routing, it handles a lot of the OAuth calls and functions that we may be doing within our app, and it means that we don't have to rewrite them ourselves. It's a really good, quick start way of getting an app up and running. Next, I'm going to install .env, so .env, and that allows us to use environment variables to store things such as our sign-in secret and our bot token. And then finally, what I'm going to install is ngrok. And ngrok is going to expose my local host development server and the port it's running on to my Slack workspace via api.slack.com, so that when I'm running it on my local machine, I can still use my app within my Slack workspace. You could circumnavigate the need for ngrok by hosting your app on something like AWS, Azure, Heroku. But for development purposes and learning, I'm quite happy to use my local machine. So that's our installation of our packages. What we need to do now is create some files, and the first one being a .env file. This is where we're going to store those sign-in secrets and bot OAuth tokens that we discussed earlier. So what I want you to do now is copy and paste them into your environment file and save it. Next step, we're going to create our JavaScript file. We can actually start writing some JavaScript now. So index.js is the file that I'm going to use. And this is where we can actually start building our app. I'm going to require the two packages that I installed, Slack Bolt and .env, so that we can use the Slack Bolt framework and access the environment variables. And then I'm going to initialize my app using the bot token and the sign-in secret from the environment file itself. Finally, the next thing I'm going to do is actually start my app. So in my anonymous function, I'm going to use it at the beginning of my execution, and I'm going to start my app. If I had a port number defined in my environment variable, that's what it would use, or perhaps I would be defining this on AWS, Heroku, or something like that. Otherwise, I'm going to use 3000. Let's start the app and make sure that our JavaScript is executing correctly and our app is going to run. So what I want to do first is ngrok http 3000. Now I'm doing that because I'm going to use it later, not because I need to use it right this moment. And I'll come back to the information on that script terminal screen in a minute. What I am going to do is nodemon index.js. And I'm going to start my app, and what you can see straight away down at the bottom there is the console log, hello world, Bolt app is running. And that's because I have this line here. So I know my app is now running correctly, and I'm happy that my app is now running correctly. What I want to do now is go back to that terminal screen. We can see that our localhost 3000 is now exposed via this URL. Every time you stop your app and close ngrok, unless you're paying for ngrok, this will change each time. So that's just something to be aware of. So now let's give our app some functionality. We mentioned every time the app opens, we want to send a message to the user. Now, in order to do that, we need to subscribe to an event. Our Slack app needs to listen and subscribe to events that go on within the Slack workspace. So head to Event Subscriptions and click Enable Events. We have the option now to configure the request URL. Funnily enough, we just got a request URL, and that's our ngrok URL. Now there's a little bit we need to add on, which is Slack events. And the reason we're using Slack events is because our Slack Bolt framework handles that routing for us. Now we can see the request URL was verified, so it means it's pinged our app running on our local host and made sure that the challenge parameter was returned and that everything is connected and working. So we're happy that the app is up and running and that our workspace can in fact connect to it. The next thing we want to do is subscribe to a bot event, and that is where we're going to do app home opened. Now every time the app home opens, our app running on our local host machine is going to receive this event payload. What we do with it next is up to us. So let's head over to VS Code and actually do something with that event. So first of all, what we need to do is we actually need to listen to that event. So let's put an event listener, app event, and we're going to listen to the app home opened. What we now want to do is, for development and testing purposes, I'm going to add a console log just so that I can see if I'm looking at my app logs that it's actually happened and we've listened to the event. And what I'm then going to do is just say hello to the user, and I'm going to send a message to the user. The way we do that is by using the say function. We can see it's passed in as a parameter here. We can also see that we're using the event, and by getting the event from the payload, we can access the user who sent us, who triggered the event. So we can actually make it more personal and say hello to the actual user themselves. Now let's leave that there for now. Save our JavaScript file. We can see that it restarted, and head back over to api.slack.com. We're going to click on install app. Cancel just for one moment. Let's just make sure that we did in fact save those changes. They are saved. So we have saved the subscriptions to this event and the request URL, they are saved. So let's go to install app and reinstall it to our workspace, and just make sure that any changes we made to the configuration are pushed to our workspace. And now what we want to do is just refresh our our Slack app and make sure that any changes are indeed synced with our app. Now what we can see is there's our app, the one that we've just created. Let's click on it and see what happens. There we go. We get a hello world and JFox UK user message. Now straight away I know that as soon as I've opened this app now, the event has triggered, my app has received the event and sent us a message, and we can see it there. If we head back over to VS Code and look at the logs, we can see that someone just opened the app and a DM has been sent to them. Fantastic. Now that is a very simple piece of functionality. Let's build upon that functionality just a little bit more. Let's go to App Home and go to Show Tabs and show the Home tab. Let's click Install App, reinstall it to our workspace, and let's have a look at our Slack app workspace now and see what we see different. There we go, now we see a Home tab. We still have the same functionality. Every time the app opens, a message is sent to the user. And we do get this spinning loading wheel now. So instead of having this spinning wheel, let's push a view to this app and give it some actual context and something useful to look at. Now an app home is really useful for things such as dashboards, reports. Perhaps it's a sales app and it can display information of your current sales pipeline, or it's a weather app and it's telling us about the weather today. We're not going to be that fancy, but let's push a view for this app home. So let's make a bit of space, and we're going to add a block of code here. So I'm going to copy and paste in a block of code for us to have a look at. This block of code is going to use this method here, clients client.views.publish. And what that allows us to do is publish a view to the Slack app. We're defining the user using the event.user again, so we know which user triggered the event, and we're going to push it to the context of that user. Here we define what the view is, and we're defining that it's the type of home for the app home. And then we're going to actually tell it what the block of the view is. And here's the payload of what we're going to display to the user. Now, that looks relatively straightforward, but how did I get to this point? Well, I certainly didn't write this payload myself. I could if I wanted to, and I could tweak it if I really wanted to, but let's utilize some Slack tools to be able to generate that payload for us. Now, Slack is very kind and gives us Block Kit Builder. Now, Block Kit Builder is what you see is what you get, WYSIWYG editor, where you can choose your blocks on the left-hand side here and add them to your payload. You can rearrange them in any way you want that suits you. You can add things such as images, buttons, you can add plain text, and you can add markdown, so you can have emojis and things like that. You can even have images, date pickers, checkboxes, all sorts of wonderful views that you can add to your blocks. But what we get is the payload on the right hand side. We can edit the text in the payload, and we can even edit the URL for the images. So once we get the desired look and feel here, copy and paste the payload, and we can paste it into our blocks section for our view that we're going to publish. Now, as soon as I click save, I do the standard on api.slack.com of reinstalling to the workspace to make sure everything's in sync. I refresh my Slack app. What I should now see is a view, and we see that on the screen right now. We can see I have my header with an emoji, so it's markdown, and we can see some text here also containing markdown because I've got code snippets, and I can even see a button, which in further iterations of this app, we can handle what happens on the action of a button being clicked. Perhaps it's on a report and you want to trigger a more in-depth view, or you select a region to show the weather for that region. This is where we can now start thinking of the features and functionalities of our app and where it can take our app, what features it can do to save our users time. I hope that was useful. I hope this session has really helped you kind of pique your knowledge and curiosity into what a Slack app can actually do. We've looked at creating an app to start with on api.slack.com, creating the app, installing it into our workspace, giving it a chat write scope so that it can send a message to our users, subscribing to an event, which was the app home opened, and then in JavaScript, writing a view, listening to an event, and actually connecting with our Slack workspace in general. We used NodeMon to help develop. We used ngrok to expose our app running on a localhost server, and we used Slack Bolt to just speed up the process of delivering our app to our users in general. Now, what you can do is we've written it in JavaScript. You can build your app using any JavaScript feature you want. You can make a HTTP call to your on-premise server, pull some information, and display it to your users. You could connect to Jira to log a bug, ServiceNow to create a case, query Salesforce, and then create a Google Doc off the back of it if you really wanted to, all in one app to make business as usual so easy and streamlined, and make Slack your digital HQ without swivel chairing and accessing all these other systems and adding to that process and time and difficulty to an already challenging workplace day. Thank you everyone for joining my session today. I hope it was informative, I hope it was useful, and I hope you at least enjoyed it. If you want to connect with me on Twitter, follow me at jfoxuk, and connect with me on LinkedIn, jfoxuk. Any questions about today's session, feel free to post them in the live chat, or connect with me on social, and I'd be more than happy to try and answer them. Thank you for joining the session today, and thank you to our host, CRM Stage, for putting on such an amazing event. Be sure to check out the other events that are going on today, the sessions, and give full support to everyone hosting today, because there has been a lot of effort put into making today's events successful. Again, thank you, and until next time, goodbye.